Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 322 of the Assorted Calibers podcast, the Second Amendment podcast. There's a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and with me tonight, she is wonderful. She is a celestial body, and she's also just a cool co-host, all that, but also a celestial body, Erin Paulette. How you doing, Erin?
So you're saying I have my own gravity well? Are you calling me fat?
I mean, if you remember your physics and relativity, we all have our own gravity well.
Uh-huh.
You are the reason why we experience gravity is that we are attracted to the Earth, but also the Earth is attracted to us.
Uh-huh.
And
yeah.
Erin, we're all attracted to you. We are all in your gravity well. But instead of being pulled at to physically crush into you and forming you into a neutron star, we just all like you and like to listen to hear what you say. Everyone is all compelled to put you in their ear holes.
That was sweet. I mean, kind of strange and inept, but sweet. Thank you.
I remind the universe that I did not choose the name Weer'd. It was given to me.
I'm strangely tired, which is not like me. I'm usually a night person, and I get my second wind after supper. So, I'm yawning a lot. I have the sleepies. I don't really have a whole lot to report about last week, other than there are a lot of international news agencies that want to talk to me, which I know it sounds like a brag, but it's not. A lot of them, they wanted to talk to me before the election, and I declined, basically saying something along the lines of, look, I know how you're going to do this, and you're going to make it seem like, queer people are scared, which they were, but I mean, it's just the whole, we're going to grab guns and like form vigilante things and fight the government, and it was just, I could see all the ways that it could be turned into raw meat for the audience, and I just said, you know what, we are a nonprofit. We can't get involved in politics other than our one little thing, which is the Second Amendment. And so we're not going to comment until after the election, because we're still going to have all these problems after the election, regardless of who wins. So if you still want to know about it, contact me then. And I've been contacted by some new ones and by some old ones. I mean, French and British and German, and That's fine. I'm happy to do it. I kind of wish, actually it's more than kind of, I truly wish that American media would want to talk to me about it, because we've got to get the word out to, queer people that we exist. And so, I mean, Blazing Sword and Pink Pistols, we're known in the gun world, but those are the people who don't need to hear a message, because they already know. We need to get the message out to the far left, and having a problem with that. And so that hasn't happened, but I'm hoping that if I do enough of these foreign interviews, that maybe someone domestic will pick it up. And it's okay, what the heck. Because we've talked about it on Discord. I really haven't mentioned it here, but why not? I've been being, good Lord. I have received several messages, like one over Facebook and a couple of emails, where someone says that they work for a documentary and they want to fly me to Australia.
Oh yes,
for like 3 weeks, and we're gonna take hallucinogens or psychotropic drugs.
I think they specifically mentioned psilocybin mushrooms.
Yeah, and they said that they're going to get basically all these people who are passionate and disagree about things like, gun rights and Palestine and whatever, and they're going to get us all high and they're going to film us. And the idea is that if we're all high as kites, we'll find some common ground. And my reply was, entrapment is illegal, officer.
Yeah. By the way, when you sent me this, the first thing I did was look up did Australia legalize psilocybin mushrooms? And they did not. And I believe I think I found some articles, though again, it's Australia, so I didn't dig too deep. So if you are Australian and listening to this and I've got it wrong, my apologies, but you're a really long way away. So it really didn't seem worth me digging super duper deep. But I also think that their legal system is very, very similar to ours and to the UK's, where it is not only because it's not a medicine like, say, morphine or heroin, where there are some carve outs where you could do some research on it. It's easier. It's very, very difficult for us to do research on marijuana or psilocybin or LSD or some of those other, Schedule 1 drugs, because it's just like, no, there's no use for these. They're not therapeutic. And so therefore, no, even the idea that you were researching that they might be therapeutic, no, that's verboten, because we've told you they're not therapeutic and they aren't forever.
Yeah, and so I don't know exactly what this is, but it's all the red flags. I mean, it could be a scam, because honestly, why would anyone want to fly me across an ocean to another continent and basically pay for a 3-week vacation?
Mm-hmm.
And then while I'm there, I'm at their mercy. That sounds like a really good way to get trafficked, or murdered, probably murdered in my case.
Or honestly, just like have the, we'll let you book your own flights, or you could book your flights through us and we'll reimburse you and all that, and get you to, because that's a big common one right there, is the, anyone who's hung out in YouTube and commented on any of the popular channels, especially the gun channels, a YouTube channel that sounds very similar to the name of the creator will message you and say, "Congratulations, you've won a free gun. DM me for with your personal information." And they will say, "Oh yeah, I am Paul Harrell. I'm faked my death. I'm still alive, and you have won a free gun. And all you need to do is pay me the shipping fee, and I will ship it to the FFL of your choice." And you give them $25-$30 or whatever for shipping fee, and then they just disappear. Congratulations, they took the money and went. And then they just need to have 20 or 30 people send them $30, and that's a pretty good payday.
Yep. But I mean, even if all of this was completely legitimate and I didn't get in trouble with the Australian government, I mean, okay, you're going to release a documentary of me high, which, first of all, I'm going to look terrible, but I mean, I don't know what that would do to my right to own firearms. But I mean, there's film evidence of me abusing drugs. And so, hey, that means I'm irresponsible, and someone would see it, and I'm sure they would, use that against me to get my Second Amendment rights taken away, because here I am, I'm a drug user. And so it's just, yeah, this is all the red flags. I mean, really, all it needs is a couple of little yellow stars in the corner for it to be the flag of China. It's that big of a red flag. And it's just like, no, not going to do it.
Also, you are like the worst for this, because you are not someone who experiments with mind-altering substance. You occasionally have your nice little sippy sip of rum, and you call it good. And I can imagine the number of times that you have been loaded on rum has been very, very few and far between. And so I remember actually one of the guys I used to work with when I was on the tour boat, and that he did deep sea diving as one of his many career paths, and they did a thing where they put them in a decompression chamber and brought them down to really, really deep depths, and they had like puzzles and things like that for them to do, because you get to a point where you get enough nitrogen in your system, it actually makes you high. And so they want people to experience that in a controlled environment so that you can get used to it, so that when it hits you, you're not just completely looped out and out of the world. And he was talking about he and a buddy were partiers, and when that nitrogen hit, they're like, "Oh, this is kind of fun." But meanwhile, there was a couple of little more straight-laced people, and they were just like out of their mind because they just were like, "Oh, what do I do? Things are looking weird." So yeah, it might be just the mushrooms hit Erin, and suddenly she just freezes.
So speaking of things looking weird, how was your week, Weird?
My week was relatively uneventful.
Great. Okay, on to the main topic.
Yeah. On to the main topic. Yeah. No, didn't. Yeah, there's some family stuff that happened that was all good and fine, but nobody cares. And
I mean, I care, but it's not the sort of thing you share publicly.
Yes. Yeah. No. That's really it. I may have some more interesting things next week, but we will see. Remind me after the show is done, because I'll let you know, because it's we'll see. But yeah, other than that, yeah, let's on with the show. So yeah, the not a ton of, it's hilarious. This election happens, and all of a sudden, like, we've gone from like having like 5 or 6 news stories every show to like I'm sifting around and going, is there anything we're talking about? Like, I literally like dug up I dug up one of these stories just this morning. So one is, this is kind of like something that I expected, and kind of what we talked about last week, is essentially just speculating on what Donald Trump may do when he comes into office. And essentially this is from the Reload, and the National Shooting Sports Foundation has publicly requested that President Trump, once he takes office for his second term, get rid of Joe Biden's the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. Get rid of that. And I think that is pretty much a sure thing, since one thing that we can say that Donald Trump did for sure was, within like the first week that he was in office in 2016, he essentially just signed executive orders that just said, yeah, everything that Obama did for the last 8 years as under executive orders, yeah, those aren't there anymore. And so the executive order that created this White House office, yeah, this will just go away unless you think there's something else is going to happen.
I don't know. At this point, I am so very skeptical regarding Trump and guns, and I keep bringing it up, but he's the one who brought us the bump stock ban, and didn't bring us National Concealed Carry Reciprocity or the Hearing Protection Act or anything else like that. And
we were also speculating, when there was the rumbles that after the Mandalay Bay shooting in Las Vegas, that there was rumbles that President Trump was considering a bump stock ban, and we kind of got excited because one way that might work out really, really well is President Trump could say these bump stocks are machine guns and shouldn't be allowed to have. But I also don't want to take away the property of legal gun owners, so instead I will just say register them in the NFA, which you can't do because they're machine guns. So we could have an amnesty and allow there to be an amnesty on it. And instead of registering our bump stocks, of which, if you wanted to, you could register your bump stock as a machine gun. I don't know why you would, but instead you could just say, this AR-15 that I have a bump stock on, I'm just going to register it as a machine gun and just drill a third hole and put an auto sear pack in, or drop in auto sear, or all of that. And you can do whatever you want.
And I would have been fine with that. But...
yeah. And that would have been like we trade essentially a goofy range toy. And I will say, after shooting David's binary trigger AR, my God, have you ever shot a binary trigger, Aaron?
I have not shot a binary trigger, no.
They are so much funner. At least for me, it was so much more fun than I could possibly imagine. Like it knew exactly what it was. And the first time, the first thing I did was, David showed me how to set it all up so that, all right, there it goes. It's on binary. Okay. I think it only fired on binary, but either way. And so I pulled the trigger, bang, and then I reset the trigger, bang. Okay, that's how it works. And bang, bang, bang. And then suddenly it was going full auto, and it felt almost like I was shooting. We had Chance from Say Uncle was there and he had a full auto AR M16. I don't really know how to what it started out his life as, and friend of the show with a common name. He had his Mac 11 with a 5.56 Lage upper on it. And so that was shooting that like poor man's M16. And so I was shooting a bunch of full auto 223, and all of a sudden I was shooting another full auto 223 as far as I was concerned. Like it had like all the fun of full auto, and maybe even more fun than full auto. So but the bump stocks are dumb. Like I've never shot a bump stock, but I have bump fired guns before, and it's one of those like, okay, yeah, it shoots really fast, but I don't like it. It doesn't feel natural to me. It's just a weird situation. Yes, it shoots really fast, but it's not natural. Not like the binary trigger like shot like really fast and really natural. And so it's one of those like, okay, yeah, I would easily give those up for a fair trade and a machine gun amnesty would be a marvelous fair trade. And instead we just got the courts tied up with a bullcrap ruling that, no, it's unconstitutional. You guys did it wrong and all that. It was all for nothing. Thanks, President Trump. You were supposed to be on our side.
So, we're looking at this article, trying to get us back on track here. And, Trump told the NRA, quote, every single Biden attack on gun owners and manufacturers will be terminated my very first week back in office, end quote. And I'm skeptical, because one of the things that I've been telling my friends who are freaking out about this presidency is reminding them that Trump is a blowhard, and he says a lot of things. And what you need to do is not so much listen to what he says, but watch what he does. And so, at this point, he said this thing. That's nice. Let's see what he does. I mean, the best I can do is acknowledge that the possibility that it'll happen. I'm not going to go above 50%, to be honest. But it would be, I think, a good thing if this were to happen, because as we've pointed out for the past 4 years, but definitely in the past 2, this administration has really been coming down on gun owners, gun ownership, gun sales, just the Second Amendment in general. And so anything to get rid of this, and especially something that was just created by executive fiat, I'm fine with that. I have a problem. I understand the necessity behind a lot of executive orders, but I feel that they are abused. And I believe that a lot of things which are done by executive order shouldn't be, and should be done through legislation instead. So that the legislators, they have to pass it. It has to go through our system of government. And then if the people don't like it, then those people don't get elected. And I feel that's what we should do with a lot of these. And I didn't much care for the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, but if I recall correctly, that was passed through Congress. And so that at least is the way things are supposed to be done. And so I can't really say I'm cautiously optimistic. I know what I want to have happen. I don't know. But I know that you're very, very optimistic. I've called you Pollyanna before. So I sincerely hope that you are right and I am wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite a Pollyanna, because again, I just went on a diatribe on how President Trump absolutely had, was quote unquote our friend and had done all of that and could have had some very, very interesting chess moves in the 3D, 4D, however many D chess, the memes are, and all that. And instead just stabbed us in the back. Because again, he took away bump stocks for a very brief period of time. And what did we get from it? Absolutely nothing. We had these great legislations. The Hearing Protection Act that takes suppressors off the NFA is a phenomenal law, and I love it. The Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act is it's stupid that it's not already law. Like, it makes no damn sense that you can carry a loaded firearm in your home state, but you can't drive across country with that. And in many cases you can drive for hundreds of miles in any direction and be perfectly legal with that gun, even when you cross state lines, because most states, all the states that border them are, either are constitutional carry or have reciprocity with the surrounding states. And, but all of a sudden, in a few directions and all that, suddenly, no, you can't conceal carry here. And in some cases, like for those of us in the, in New England, I can't drive into the rest of the country. Miles and I absolutely had to button down our vehicle really, really nicely, because we had to drive through New York, and we actually drove through New Jersey a little bit. And those are two states that are one of those, like, no, you got to be real careful when driving with guns through here, because they do not honor any permits whatsoever, and they're not going to let you carry here. And so, yeah, now we were entirely under the Firearms Owner Protection Act for that stage of our journey. It's dumb, but again, we didn't get any of those. Like, it seems like a no-brainer, but we didn't get any of those. So, but will say that again, he just systematically went through. I actually remember I was at a function with my parents on that, and this was in southern Maine, so everybody was generally very, very leftist singers. As a matter of fact, I was sitting at the table with one of the Democrat governors of Maine at this event, and they were talking about Trump. It was in 2016. He just assumed office, and like, oh, did you see that he just undid this Obama executive order? And one of the guys says, yep, he's going to do every single one. And as far as I know, I don't think he missed any.
In general, that's great. I mean, I don't want to blanket say, yes, repeal them all, because I don't know what all of them are. There may be some good ones there, but yeah, we do have this history of this administration just coming down on the Second Amendment. And in fact, there's a link in that article about how that very specific, Office of Gun Violent Prevention within the White House, contacting Glock and basically telling them, we don't like the way that your pistols can be converted into full auto with, these Glock switches. You need to change how you make your guns. And Glock more or less said, LOL, get stuffed.
Well, as they should have, because this is,
yes.
I mean, we have 1,000,001 like audio connections, and there was just recently some sort of hearing. I didn't hear anything long enough to grab it for a FISC, but like, I know I heard Mazie Hirono talking about like bump stocks making guns more accurate and more powerful, or no, it was pistol braces making guns more accurate and more powerful, and like the next person came on and says, none of that's true. Like, it's a shorter barrel and or more concealable, and just like none of that's true. Putting a pistol brace on a gun makes it less concealable because they're bulky, and shorter barreled guns are less powerful and less accurate. And so you're full of it. And these people know absolutely nothing about guns. And the bottom line is that yes, Glock could change their design so that these Glock switches the Glock switches that we currently have floating around and there's files of, and the China's selling them to us and all that, would not fit and work in brand new, never mind legacy Glocks, but would not work in brand new Glocks. But you could just design a different switch to get around whatever the heck they're going to put into it, because The first guns that were self-loading were machine guns. Like it takes extra parts to make something semi-auto.
But still, there is, well, I don't know what the legal term is, but this really does seem like abuse.
Oh, yeah.
Because this isn't the government, again, passing a law the way that it's supposed to. It's the White House saying, hey, nice company you've got there. Be a shame if something happened to it.
Mm-hmm.
And pressuring them. So, yes, in this particular instance, I think that getting rid of this is going to be nothing but good for those of us who believe in the Second Amendment and the right to keep and bear arms. Of course, Everytown for Gun Safety, a wholly owned subsidiary of Michael Bloomberg Incorporated, does not approve of this.
Well, also this office is essentially a wholly owned subsidiary of Michael Bloomberg Incorporated, because several of the key bureaucrats within this office are Everytown employees or former Everytown employees.
This is my shocked face, Weer'd.
Yeah. I mean, it's so. I will just say you're 100% right on the. We'll believe it when we see it. We at ACP will be reporting on this, on how it happens, and just for funsies, I want to just throw in that what would be really, really cool is, well, one thing would be just Trump signing an executive order that just says, yeah, this thing, it's not here anymore. Pack your stuff. You're gone. Along with this saying, he's going to fire Steve Diedelback on day one. I see no reason why that's not going to happen, because that's pretty common to like all the presidential appointees within the various things generally tend to get their pink slip in the change of an administration. But one thing that might actually be kind of cool is, instead of closing the office, why not just lay off everybody inside of it and hire new people and suddenly have nothing but Second Amendment activists? All right. Well, either way, let's move on to the next story. And this one really is kind of one of those, this is the reason why they talk about the Charleston loophole, the fact that the shooter at the black church had a hold on his firearm purchase and still was able to buy it. And the reason is because nobody cared. Everyone was asleep at the switch. And so, yeah, this was abuse that was going through, is that nobody was going to sleep at the switch. So guess what? We need to fail so that people retain their rights. And in the case of Washington, they do not have that. And it appears that their background check system has been down for, it sounds like actually the better part of November.
Well, they said that it went down on November 2nd. So as we record this, that's 2 weeks and some change.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't find... Okay, there we go. Cyber attack. I'm not really sure why. I mean, it could just be someone taking it down for the hell of it. It could be a political statement. Who knows?
I mean, it could just be simply one of those like ransomwares. Actually, my local grocery store is it's part of the giant food chain, and I believe all of the giant food grocery stores have major issues with their computer systems because they got hit with a cyber attack. I don't know what it is. They're being tight-lipped about it, but my guess is it's ransomware, because a lot of people don't want to talk about that because, well, the dirty little truth is that they say, give us Bitcoin and we'll give you the passcode for the encryption that we installed on your drives. And they give them the Bitcoin and they never hear anything from them because they just still lose everything.
I mean, that's probably what's going on because they kept it vague. You'd think that if it was a DDoS and denial of service, I don't know if the first D is dedicated or distributed, but it's a brute force attack. You'd think that if it was that, they would have said something. Instead, they just say a cyber attack. But yeah, as of 1 p.m. that Sunday, the state level automated check system secure automated firearms e-check or safe went offline. And so, well, not just that, but according to this article, several court networks and websites. So it almost seems like the system that oversees the state-level background checks was maybe just a target of opportunity. It was collateral damage as opposed to being the main target. Who knows? But it says here, during the outage, Washington State Patrol received an average of 700 background check requests daily, but none could be processed. And so you've got a lot of people who are, law-abiding citizens, and they can't exercise their fundamental right. And I don't remember who said it first, but someone said a right delayed is a right denied.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what happened here for 2 weeks and a couple of days.
Yeah. I mean, you were mentioning about the fact that you're talking with a lot of people. Obviously, roughly half the country was not supporting President Trump. Actually probably even more than that, because it was roughly half the people who voted. So there's a lot of people that are unhappy and concerned about Donald Trump taking office, and I can totally understand why they would be feeling that. It's probably the reason why you said I wish I'd be contacted by more American media things, but the bottom line is we've got we're right in the crux of a weird schism in the fact that we are pro 2A and pro queer, and the right has been very hostile to queer and the left has been very hostile to 2A.
Oh, you ain't lying.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's very hostile. It's not just they're not great about it. No. Like we're talking about we don't really trust Trump on 2A, but he's at least saying he's our friend. No. They're saying we don't like you, and depending on which side and depending on which part of you they don't like. But if you are a gun owning queer person or someone who has no issue with who people love and what gender they identify as, and like the Second Amendment, there's someone from both sides that doesn't like you. Ugh. And but either way, I say that because now there's a change in regime and all that. If you are in the queer community, you're feeling kind of nervous, and I don't blame you. And you might suddenly be, I either never really thought about guns or had thought about guns a little bit, but it was just one of those, it wasn't really worth getting off the couch. Now you might be wanting to get off the couch, and guess what? You can't do it. But also, besides those people who now politically may want to get their hands on a gun, there's the day-to-day people who suddenly realize, oh my God, I might need a gun. Like there's people that have stalkers and have relationships that end badly and things like that, where suddenly it's one of those or get attacked and suddenly realize, this, safe world that I was living in, that I thought that I was completely, invincible in. Oh no, not so much. Maybe I need to get a gun. And nope, you cannot, because Washington has said, all sales must go through gun shops, and gun shops are not allowed to sell guns because they can't connect with the background check system.
Mm-hmm. And just by some quick math here, assuming that it was out for 2 weeks and they said an average of 700, that's 10,500 applications in that period.
Wow.
That weren't approved. Yeah, when you put it like that, it really drives it home.
Yeah, especially since it's one state, and while Washington's not a small state in either land mass nor population, it's also not California or New York or New Jersey. Like if this was to happen in a state with a bigger population, that's even more people disenfranchised, or nationwide.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this is one reason why would you be opposed to background checks? Well, this is one of the reasons, and also why that Charleston loophole, talking point of the anti-gunners is something that we need to be very, very hostile towards, because again, this is trying to make it so that what's happening in Washington right now can happen to all of us. Is all we need to do is say that traffic ticket you got the other day could be a felony. We just need to look into it a little bit more, and no one's going to look into it. And congratulations, you're a prohibited person, even though you're not.
So Weer'd, I have a question for you.
Yes.
What's a neocon?
I thought I knew, and Connie and I were talking after the last segment that was aired, and she got talking about it, and she said, you know what? She said, maybe this is better for a segment of its own, and who am I to argue? I am pleased to welcome back to the show Connie Elliott. And Connie, you have worked in a number of various conservative think tanks. Actually, do you want to list off a few of them? Just because, why not?
Actually, I've avoided think tanks,
okay.
But I had worked on the Jim Miller campaign in '94 and a variety of other campaigns. I was an advisor to Dr. Ben Carson on both the Economic and National Security Advisory Committees in 2016. And I've drifted in and out of different things around Washington for most of my life. How's that?
Oh, that is great. What a great mind. Why not have it in a think tank?
For a while, I tried. Well, my husband tried being an entrepreneur, and we found out that we needed somebody to run the operations side of the house.
Mm-hmm.
So for a while, I was the chief operating officer of a small electronics manufacturing and software company.
Mm-hmm.
I handled everything except sales and engineering. So inside the four walls, outside the four walls. That was an interesting experience. And then I had kids, and the kids needed a lot of mom. I said, well, I can make money and I can write at any time, but my kids are my kids only once.
Yeah, no, I
so
you know that I hold that near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
But so we just before, everybody who knows everything knows that I've got a gift for gab, and I like to talk a little bit before we start an interview just to warm everybody up. Also lets me check the equipment, and all of that. And you mentioned the term neoconservatism, and I started talking about my opinion of the term, and you said, you know what, this is better to be recorded, not just bantered about. So why don't you first start out? What is a neoconservative?
The original neoconservatives were red diaper babies. A lot of them were New York Jews.
Now let's step back real quick, because I am very familiar with the term of a red diaper baby, but there are definitely some people who listen to this show who are way too young to have ever heard that term.
Red diaper babies were babies who were raised in communist or socialist families, sort of to be the next generation of the revolution.
And I will also just interject real quick to say that growing up, listening to, I've mentioned we had a great eulogy show for the ACP Mag Dump on the life and death of Rush Limbaugh when he passed away, and I consider him to be an instrumental force in this podcast. Not necessarily on the politics, because I've gone in many directions in my political career. I don't think at any point in time I ever agreed with Rush Limbaugh politically, but I fell in love with talk radio, which made me fall in love with podcasting, and that's where we are today. But he was very frequent to talk about red diaper babies, and you would often hear things like card carrying communist. And when you mentioned the red diaper babies, these were card carrying communists, literally, in the fact that they would have membership cards to a various communist group.
Yes, and they had profound influence. Students for a Democratic Society at its senior levels was run by red diaper babies. David Horowitz, who broke with them over the genocide in Cambodia was a red diaper baby. And so that brings us back to the neoconservatives. Just as Horowitz was appalled by the communist-driven slaughter in Kampuchea, Cambodia, where they killed off as much as 50% of the population in 3 or 4 years' time. The original neoconservatives like Irving Kristol and Gertrude Himmelfarb were appalled by the Holodomor, the starvation imposed by the Soviets in the Ukraine that killed these people wholesale. They were there, the modern socialist was a different outgrowth from the 30 Years' War. They rejected the crowns after the 30 Years' War because the horrors that the crowns and the churches imposed on continental Europe were so horrible. They depopulated Central Europe so badly that from 1648, the population didn't recover to the 1618 population until Bismarck in the mid-late 19th century. Think about that for a moment. I mean, this is only at the beginning of gunpowder, the widespread deployment of gunpowder in European warfare. And they slaughtered people so thoroughly that it took them 3 centuries to recover their population.
I mean, that's almost bubonic plague levels.
Yeah. So there were 2 paths of rejection. One was the Lockean path that became especially the Scottish Enlightenment, although we kind of adopt Bastiat and Voltaire as part of that. They want to say individualist, but it's really the individual is rightly a moral agent and must be left free to make his or her own decisions about his or her own life. And surely by applying reason and using series of agreements, of contracts, we can develop some kind of means of governing ourselves that is at least better than the charnel houses that all the divine writers gave us. So that was one side. And the other grew out of what we think of more as the French Enlightenment, certainly from Rousseau forward. And that was a very, first involved a process of deracination, of severing from root, so that man is returned to that innocent savage stage that Rousseau tried to romanticize. And then through that, a process of developing the collective will centrally expressed came about. And it didn't matter if you were sans-culotte or if you were part of the socialist revolution, and this was done through the state, and as Lenin operationalized it, done through the vanguard of the party, which had to take over the state because they were the only ones with revolutionary consciousness. You would be part of the central will, or the general will centrally expressed. And that central expression would be dictated by the state. So that's the tradition the red diaper babies came up in. And all of this was supposed to be about alleviating human suffering. At least we won't end up depopulating the world like the crowns did in Europe. And that worked until some very honest people examined the Ukrainian genocide, the Holodomor, because it was horrible. I mean, famine is horrible. There is no other way to describe it. And they said, this is terrible. And they full-throatedly rejected the socialist revolution, and they became almost militant classical liberals, right? They dove into that Lockean experiment that is the United States full-throatedly and full-heartedly. But they didn't just do that. They applied another couple of centuries of learning and reasoning and innovation. They didn't just fight communist rhetorically, but like Irving Kristol, who was one of the great intellectual lights of the first generation of the neoconservative movement, was an economist, and he developed an entire understanding of imperfect information and its use in they called theory of the consumer. How do individuals choose different goods under conditions of scarcity? And that just means that, all our resources don't just spring forth from a font constantly. We have to give up something in order to choose something. Even if it's only time, we give up one thing in order to get another. Life is made of opportunity cost. The whole understanding of imperfect information was profound. We are still, trying to absorb all of it into the heart of the economic discipline. And I don't think we will for some time, just like we are still plumbing the depths of Adam Smith, because his body of work was actually so rich and so broad. So you had that, and you had a series of essays, one after the other, and arguments on the pages of Commentary magazine. That's why Commentary magazine is a thing. It was a home for the ferment behind, the intellectual ferment behind the neoconservative movement. The other thing that we lost is that there was a second generation of the neoconservative movement. They didn't all become Republicans, but they were all firmly about reinforcing the Constitution and its promises to the American people, and they were anti-communist. Jeane Kirkpatrick, the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, was a member, and so was Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan. And Moynihan was focused on using that very honest examination on domestic policy. How are we realizing our own promises? How are we working to alleviate human suffering? Are we really guilty of the inhuman things the communists accused us of doing? How can we do better? How can we alleviate the suffering of our own people better? He was very focused on that. All of that got lost with Leo Strauss, who I think was at Johns Hopkins, and what have been referred to as the Vulcans. So this was out of the international relations discipline. International relations as a discipline grew out of political science, and it was there to predict and then counter or oppose the Soviets. We were supposed to produce a whole generation of intellectuals who were there to tear apart the Soviets and, in classic mid-century political science fashion, reject what those of us in economics might think of as analytical rigor. But yeah, and these people, this was where we got John Bolton. It's where we got my friend Frank Gaffney, who invited me onto the committee for the Present Danger China, which was a whole series of committees, 4 of them now, neoconservative in origin and leadership, focused against communist infiltration, manipulation, and warfare against the United States, and really trying to hew closely to that first generation neoconservative root. But you had all these people come out from Strauss, his students, and their students. And the neoconservative movement, its heart, got lost in we have to oppose militarily and we have to prepare for war, which actually is kind of sensible, because if you want peace, you have to show that you creditably can defend yourself.
That great
Um,
Julius Caesar quote. If you want
yeah,
peace, prepare for war.
yeah. I thought that was Agrippa.
It might have
But
been. It might have been.
yeah, if you want peace, prepare for war. But then you combine that with the entire military industrial complex Eisenhower warned us about, and suddenly there becomes enormous financial incentive, not just to prepare for war, but to prepare for war using certain contractors with certain tools. And when those are the people caught in those incentives become the dominant voice, ones who've lost track of their multidisciplinary route, right? What's the saying? If the only tool you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a large part of what happened to American foreign policy since Ronald Reagan. Up until Reagan and through Reagan, you had a lot of people who understood the full range of tools, diplomatic, political, economic, and military, that we had as part of our complete national arsenal or toolbox for affecting outcomes. And you had incredible minds like Roger Robinson on the NSC directing it or coordinating it. And Roger coordinated the entire interagency action on the economic war against the Soviets. He understood you can use the American economy to drive these people out of existence into a place where they cannot be a threat to us. He did. Hey, Roger's a force of nature. My hat's off to him. But all of those voices started to disappear. There was nobody brought up behind them who could really advocate for these approaches or even make known these approaches within the halls of power. And I think that the global war on terror was used as an excuse to tar everybody caught in that GWAT mindset and incentivized to continue with this enormous contracting machine outside of government, right? To keep pumping money through it, to tar them all with the neoconservative brush. And I feel terrible because the neoconservatives, intellectually, they delivered us a victory against the Soviets, right? We're not stuck in this bipolar dichotomous, we got to be aimed at the Ruskies and go kill them space anymore. Thank God. But it is, but we've lost the breadth and depth of the ideas. You know, like, who remembers that examining the absolute failure of the public schools, especially in New York City, in the major cities in the 1970s, was a major discussion within the neoconservative movement. Outside of Maura Moynihan and a few others, nobody. That discussion is gone. And instead of asking how do we resolve this substantively, we've selected what to be caught in what David Layton at Stanford calls the tyranny of bad metrics. Everything will be run through a standardized test. The standardized test will be run by 2 or 3 textbook printers and a set coterie of authors, and we will pay lots of money to subscribe to these tests. And everything we do will be according to what these tests say, and there's no public oversight of what is in these books effectively, what is taught for the test, and what the test pass our kids on. It's not, it's this whole rich area of of social interactions where we try and figure out how do we preserve liberty? How do we shove every totalitarian impulse into the dark hole where it belongs, or incinerate it, and just make a world where all of us, even the least of us, are respected and truly treated equally before the law and in the provision of whatever services we make available. All of this is being lost to history, and the neoconservative movement is being reduced to name calling in a not very good food fight. And I think that's sad. While we still have people around like Frank Gaffney, like Maura Moynihan, and others, we should be asking, hey, what are the ideas that are important to you? Why are you pursuing them? You know, where did you get your inspiration from? So that we talked in another conversation about understanding our intellectual root so that we can put ourselves in context. And this is another case where we need to do that and understand our origins better so that we're not pushed away from, ooh, scary name, and hew to the good ideas and try and figure out how to enact them better and in some way that alleviates more of the suffering in our world. Because I think that Americans, when we're at our best, not just represent American values, but we help build the results of American values out in the world. And that makes everybody's lives better. I'm not saying you have to live like us, but hey, let's build stuff that just makes things better.
There's certainly a lot to be said about that. And this was super interesting because, as I was saying, that kind of led up to us talking about this was I really kind of came of political age during the 2000 presidential campaign between George W. Bush and Al Gore, and really had a mind opening to politics after 9/11, and really that was the phase where absolutely neoconservatism was really kind of used. I'm not directly comparing the two terms at all in any way, shape, or form, but used very similar to how the word fascist is being thrown around and Nazis being thrown around right now, namely in the fact that it's really just a word, and a word that the people who are using it can't really define it.
I think in the third generation, the standard bearers for the movement, like Bill Kristol, like Paul Wolfowitz, like John Bolton, weren't up to carrying on and representing and innovating on the incredible ideas that their mentors had. You know, it's like that whole turning thing. We're 80 years into the evolution of a movement, and that brilliance that defined it at its beginning and that context was just lost. And it's sad. It's sad, right? I hear people telling me they're great ideas again, and it's like, did you not read, name your book here? Do you not know about this body of work? There are very few new ideas. I think Jim Mattis had that right. Go read and find out what other people thought about the subject before you. And we were talking in another segment about sort of the expansion of the memory hole. One of the disservices I think that Google has done to us is that if you don't know the exact terms that people used in discussing a subject a century ago, 2 centuries ago, it can often be impossible to find those bodies of work through search, especially if they're discussions that the waiters, the people who set the priorities for the waiters for the search engine, don't want found. And I see what's happening to the memory of the neoconservative movement as part of this terrifying memory hole that we're in. You know, I didn't come out of political science, right? I didn't come up through the movement, but at least I knew what a lot of the ideas about what the innovations were about. Just the idea that you can change incentives by presenting incomplete information, you can manipulate a decision path, or people can choose things that appear to be irrational but are quite rational, what they perceive to be in their interest, given the fact that the information they have is incomplete or not completely assimilated. It's a profound set of ideas, and gives us new respect, I think, for the importance of treating one another fairly, and in truthfulness in our public dealings. There's an actual functional value in that. Ideas like that are being lost to the discussion because people want to say, ooh, neocons, bad. What are you talking about? Define the term for me. Tell me who you're talking about and why. And how many people really can beyond a vague feeling and a statement of fashion? I don't know. But I think we need to get remembering before the great forgetting is imposed on us, and start getting oral history, out of the survivors while we still can.
I mean, that is a great point, and that is why we do podcasts like the Assorted Caliber podcast. Thank you so much, Connie.
Thanks, Weer'd.
I know that one went a little bit long, but I mean, Connie has such a mind for history and politics. I was just suddenly sitting in a lecture hall in college and hoping the class would never end.
Connie is super smart, and if I could find some way to pay her what she deserves, I'd have her working for OBS full time. But she loves to tackle these really dense topics, and I mentioned I'm tired. My brain is not really in a good place right now, and so I caught about half that, and I was constantly backing up and going, wait, what happened? So that is very information dense, and I'm going to have to listen to it again.
Yeah, no, but it was good. Thanks so much, Connie, for sharing, and thanks for just saying, you know what, let's just hit record and talk about this and for everybody.
But one thing that I'm not going to have to go over again is Weer'd and Caleb talking about booze in Drinks of James Bond.
I am pleased to welcome back to the Assorted Calibers podcast, Caleb Daniels. He is, of course, the author of Licensed Troubleshooter, The Guns of James Bond, which is being published on Headstamp Publishing. How you doing, Caleb?
Doing well. Good to be back on.
So let's just start out. This is Headstamp Publishing. Ian McCollum is one of the owners of this, and he's been on the show talking about his time as a bartender. And of course, if you watch Forgotten Weapons, especially some of his more celebratory ones about like the Kickstarter programs and all that, he'll frequently mix himself a cocktail on screen. Mm-hmm. And so he's a cocktail aficionado. Those of you who have listened to me, especially on Handgun Radio, where I do my drink segment, I am of course a former bartender and cocktail enthusiast myself. And so, yeah, when we first met Caleb, I'm like, Are you someone who'll take a drink under extreme social pressure? And you said, in fact, you would. And you've also said that if the Kickstarter goes as well as all of the other Headstamp Publishing Kickstarters went, there will be a cocktail card like there have been for all the other publications. Is that correct?
Yeah. Provided we hit a certain stretch goal. I don't quote me on the number off the top of my head here, but that is part of the goal. And obviously cocktails are a huge part of the world of James Bond. So aside from the menu, which I do want to get included, don't get me wrong, because I am trying to sell books here. There is a section inside the book because James Bond's guns do not exist in a vacuum, just on the cocktails of Bond and some of the interesting things that you might not know about with his drinks. So just a little vignette already exists inside the book. But the cocktail menu we've put together is really fun, and people will not be expecting it because you can't just talk about Bond's beverages, but we've actually come up with a few signature drinks that are inspired by Bond's drinks. laced in with Bond history, laced in with our own personal history that make for actually some really good drinking, and they're just as stout as anything Ian Fleming, consummate alcoholic, could have designed.
I've actually got on my blog, and I'll throw the links in the show notes. I actually threw a couple of my own James Bond cocktail specs up there. Of course, the quintessential one that we have to go without speaking, the cocktail of the first Bond book, and one of the few totally original cocktails for Fleming was the Vesper. The martini variant. Would it be giving out too much trade secrets for me to ask what your Vesper spec is?
No, not at all. Because I think that one's pretty cut and dry. I think the most debatable ingredient for a Vesper, because it is just rehashed, 3 measures of gin, 1 of vodka, and half a measure of the Lillet, which Lillet Blanc, Coche Americano being more accurate because of the quinine. If you really want to go deep on that. Is the gin and the vodka selected. Now, frankly, I do find that that Smirnoff actually makes for the best Vespers, because a lot of the higher end vodkas that people like to throw in there have a really strong flavor profile of their own, which fights the gin very aggressively and actually makes a drink that just doesn't quite go as smoothly. So I typically use some sort of I really like the Drum Shadow gunpowder gin. I think it's a nice. It's really smooth, has a really clean finish. So I'll mix with either that, or frankly, even just with Gordon's, which is, of course, the prescribed alcohol in the novels, and is still relatively inexpensive. But with the Smirnoff and with the either Lillet or Coche Americano, makes for a very effective in terms of its actual end goal, but also in terms of flavor profile martini.
I will say right now that I have kind of messed around with it, and there's 1,000,001 recipes out there. Like, this is actually far more of a controversial take than that, because granted, what you just gave is by far the most accurate. Of course, the Quina Lillet that Bond specifies in Casino Royale is a spirit that is no longer being made, and as you are very correct, though, I will debate the Muscat wine base of the Coche Americano may be drastically different from what the Quina Lillet was like. So there's a little give and a little bit of take. I will say that what I found to be the most pleasing martini that is bespoke enough for that is step one. I don't bother with the vodka. I've done enough of it, and I've seen how the vodka affects with like a classic London dry gin, my personal favorite being Tanqueray. Is it really just kind of smooths out the gin and makes something makes it a little more smoother. And so I find that if you just simply substitute either an American style gin, New Amsterdam's actually one of my personal favorites. Though, I would say Bombay Sapphire, or if you're an American and you have a wholesale club membership, Members Mark or Kirkland both makes a London dry gin that will absolutely fit this bill. So just use I usually use 3 ounces of a Bombay Sapphire style gin, and then I do the 1 ounce of Lillet Blanc because not because it doesn't have the bitterness of the Coche Americano, but I find that it ties very, very well in with the lemon twist, and I usually throw in a couple of
it's very, very smooth.
And and
a little bit orange bitters. That's a nice touch.
The orange bitters I think helps you, and you get the bitterness. You're not getting the quinine, but you're getting your bitters. So
and I like the point that you make too about the base of the Coche, because I do find that the Lillet Blanc mixes the best with the gin and stuff. I mean, it's an alcohol that you can sip on the rocks very comfortably by itself anyway. So it's a really good mixer for it, and I've pretty consistently made it with that. It's just one of those little esoteric fact points that I think is fascinating with this is we're producing a cocktail that was very of its time with liquors that don't exist anymore, to try to capture the magic of something that, a man who famously died very early in life due to his excessive drink and smoking designed.
Yeah. So are there any other James Bond cocktails that come to mind that are worth of note for discussion?
Oh, absolutely. One of my all-time favorites appears in the novel Thunderball, and it's probably one of my personal favorite cocktails, which is the Negroni.
Oh yeah,
That's
I was hoping you'd
it's
go
a
there.
Oh yeah. I am a massive Negroni fan. A good friend of mine. I nerd out on him a lot. Me and Pat Hemingway, uh, Pat Hemingway Adams rather, talk Negronis quite a bit, and there's so many good recipes. And if you want a good sleeper Bond cocktail recipe, there's a great rum Negroni that you can produce with Blackwell, which is a rum made at Goldeneye or around the Goldeneye grounds where all the Bond novels were written by the folks that owned the grounds, who were, Chris Blackwell is the son of, there's really no nice way to put this, Ian Fleming's mistress and former neighbor in Jamaica, who now owns the property. Chris Blackwell is better known for his impact in the music industry. He brought Bob Marley to the world, among other people. So very fascinating individual all around. But
Was that Island Records?
Yes, I believe so. It's the subject of the new Bob Marley film. He is actually a character of Chris Blackwell in that movie.
Oh, that's very, very cool. And of course,
very cool. But he makes his own rum now. It appears briefly in the back of No Time to Die in James Bond's house. So this is the recipe that they do actually comes from the GoldenEye Resort, which is just replacing that gin with that dark rum, which honestly is a dark and strong enough rum where it sips more like a whiskey. It's something you can drink on the rocks very, very comfortably, and it has a very high alcohol count. It's very bitter, so it mixes in wonderfully as a Negroni, and especially with a little bit of orange peel and just a splash of bitters or juice to kind of flesh it all out. It's probably one of my favorite Bond adjacent Bond drinks.
Well, I'm gonna have to look that up, especially since I find that of the rums of the world, of which there are many, I find that Jamaica produces some of the best. And
yes,
all that. So yeah,
it's one of the black golds. It's just hard.
And if you have never had a Negroni, I just personally go. I think that the best spec is just the standard one, which is just
1-1-1.
Yeah, even equal proportions, however big or small you want to make the drink go. And it's Campari. Gin, preferably a London Dry, in my opinion, and sweet vermouth. Yeah, and just mix all of those together in equal parts, and you could either have it served up or on the rocks. And there's really no set way of serving them either. Do you have a preference on how you like to take your Negroni?
I typically do it over the rocks just because I like it nice and chilled.
Yeah, I go both ways. I think I'm probably 50-50. And then usually, though, I think in a cocktail glass and you float that orange peel on the top, but it just feels proper. Orange peel is an awful nice way for it to go. And chill your cocktail glass before you mix the drink, and then it doesn't the coldness doesn't change. But yeah, But either way, I have not met anybody who the first time they sipped a Negroni was like, "Oh, what is this? I like this." Everybody has always tasted it, been like, "Oh, that's not really my thing." But if you commit to that glass, you may find, "Can I have another?"
Yeah. See, my problem is I started drinking coffee black when I was probably 14, and I don't really take it with milk or anything, anyways, even today. And so for me, the Negroni with that intense kind of flavor and the bitterness of it completely fit my preferred flavor profile. So we've had quite the love affair over the last few years, and I don't see it going anywhere anytime soon.
I can see that. And any others that are of noteworthy?
There's a lot of really cool alcohols that appear that aren't cocktails, but are still really enjoyable if you can locate a bottle from the novels in particular, because the films obviously really focus in on the martinis. One of my personal favorites is Hagenhag pinch bottle scotch.
Mm-hmm.
That appears pretty frequently in the novels. The novel Bond is very into bourbons and scotches, and I actually found an unopened bottle of the Hagenhag pinch bottle Scotch whiskey and bullied a quarter of it had been, it had evaporated out, but we drank that, just a shot of it a piece on my wedding day with the bachelor, with my groomsmen rather. And man, it's pretty good. And so there's interesting stuff like that. And you actually mentioned Carte Blanc on a previous discussion we had. And, there's a great cocktail that comes out of that one, which is kind of a twist on an old fashioned made with Crown Royal. That's a unique cocktail that was designed by Jeffrey Deaver as a flagship drink for that book called the Carte Blanc.
And I will say, I do not much care for Crown Royal as a whiskey, but let me tell you, it is Canadian whiskey specifically. It doesn't have to be. I actually use I use Canadian Mist as for mine. I find that is the best whiskey for the price in the Canadian market, in my personal opinion. But yeah, that and Jeffrey Deaver specifies triple sec. Though I find that if you've got Grand Marnier, you will greatly appreciate that. And then Angostura bitters, and specifically stated no garnish, and served up on the served on the rocks, and that is a very, very good and very easy to make and acquire cocktail.
Yeah, it's super, super easy. It's an enjoyable one that I don't think you'd miss out on. And I think technically I think it includes an orange peel. I don't recall offhand, but I do remember that I've made it before with that, just out of my consistency with other cocktails, and find it to be a very enjoyable flavor profile in that fashion as well.
I remember very specifically Bond chiding garnish in that in that scene in the novel, and so no, it is specific. But yeah, if you wanted to throw an orange twist in it, it's not going to hurt anybody.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's just the Negroni in me. But yeah, there's a ton inside the novels.
Well, if you want to see a James Bond drink menu, then go to Kickstarter and pledge to get your copy of Licensed Troubleshooter by Caleb Daniels, because I think that is going to be quite an interesting read. And you mentioned the carte blanche, so the man has done his research. Thank you so much, Caleb Daniels.
Not a problem. Thank you.
So, as you mentioned earlier in the show, I like my little tipple of rum, and that's it. And I jokingly refer to you as a professional alcoholic. You worked as a bartender, you do all this mixology, and so you getting into liquor nerdery is like when you, Oddball, and David start getting into the super granular fine points of ballistics, and it's just like, wow, I'm not invested in this at all. I'm sorry. But you had a great time nerding out about booze. Okay, honestly, the only thing I really know about James Bond is vodka martini, shaken not stirred. And that's it.
Mm-hmm. And don't shake martinis. Oh, they're just not as good.
It somehow bruises the liquors. I don't know how you can bruise liquids, but whatever.
Well, I believe, I don't know if it started off as a legit term or all that, but I know that it has taken a definition. Bruising is when small chunks of ice from the ice cubes smashing against each other start forming inside the drink, and it makes it turn cloudy. And also, you also will have little teeny tiny icebergs floating on the surface of the drink, and it's when you shake any sort of drink, it aerates it, and that actually adds a different mouthfeel to it. It makes it not quite a sparkling beverage, if you will, but kind of a similar mouthful of the difference between a seltzer water and a still water. And so it definitely changes it around. So if you are used to a stirred martini and suddenly someone makes a shaken one, it is very much different, and it's visually very different. And so, I mean, honestly speaking, if James Bond prefers a shaken martini, then you know what? That's the way he takes his drink. I don't like him. And I will say, and I'll include in the show notes there's a video where bartender Robert Hess, who has written some really, really good cocktail books, if you want to look those up, did a thing where he made two Manhattans, one he shook and one he stirred, and just sitting there looking at the two sitting on his bar at the end is one of those like, oh, that's obviously two different drinks. And I will also say that I learned about a new cocktail when doing this interview, and I shortly after we recorded this, I decided, you know what, I'm going to make a Negroni with Jamaican rum, as said, and It's really good. It is really good. And I will note that in the Negroni family, there's a cocktail like the Boulevardier, which is just simply substituting bourbon for gin. And there's also the more drastic Old Pal, which is rye, dry vermouth, and Campari. And so all of these drinks are just slightly different, but they get their own name. So I don't like the fact that they call it a rum Negroni. I think it should be called the Golden Eye cocktail.
I agree. I'm not fully sure why I'm agreeing, but I agree.
Okay. You know who is sure of why you're agreeing?
Our listeners.
I hope. Our listeners, we're going to thank them. Thank each and every one of you guys. We really appreciate it, because otherwise we'd just be sitting here talking to each other. So we appreciate you listening to us, but we also have to give a very special thanks to our supporters on Patreon. They help keep the lights on. To be a Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers podcast to sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast, plus bonus content like the hilarious ACP blooper reels, the ACP film tracks, and the ACP mag dumps.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts and Pocket Casts. Subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
I got a blog. It's weerdworld.com. That's weerdworld.com. And hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can get more from me at linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Aaron Paulette, all one word.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
So he likes really complicated cocktails and has all these opinions on liquor. Meanwhile, I'm here just taking straight pulls out of a 1.75 liter bottle of Malibu rum coconut flavor, because I am a cheap date. Our taste in alcohol is assorted, and so is our podcast. Good night, everyone.
Good night.